Her father forced her to marry an Apache because she was albino. But instead of claiming her as his wife, the Apache warrior looked into her pale eyes and said softly, "Welcome home, my daughter." What happened next astonished the entire border region. Before we continue, please tell us where you are watching from. The wind whipped across the barren hills of the borderland between Texas and the New Mexico territory, as if driving away the sins of the people before it. Rosalie Benton stood at the window of her father's ranch and watched the clouds of dust dance on the horizon, as pale and ghostly as she herself. Her white eyelashes fluttered against the glare of the afternoon sun, and she pulled the curtain further open to protect her sensitive eyes. Rosalie Gida's voice cut through the silence like a whip. "Come here, now!" She flinched. Her slender fingers clenched the fabric of the curtain. Through the thin cotton of her dress, she could feel her skin redden again. Even in the shadow of the house, the sun showed her no mercy, and neither did her father. With trembling hands, she smoothed her almost white hair and stepped into the main room of the ranch. Gida Benton stood in the middle of the room. His burly figure cast a long shadow across the unpolished wooden floorboards. 3 men waited beside him. They were ranchers from the neighborhood, whom she recognized by the hum of their quiet conversation and the smell of horse sweat and whiskey. "There she is," said Gida, his voice cold and businesslike. "My problem." Rosalie remained standing in the doorway, her arms instinctively crossed in front of her chest. The men stared at her as if she were a curiosity at a fair. Her red eyes, the eyes of a demon, as the townspeople whispered, looked down at the floor. "My God, Jad," muttered one of the men, Bill Crawford from the neighboring farm. "She really is, well, just like you said, a ghost," added another. "Looks like she could disappear at any moment." Gida laughed bitterly. If only she would. But no, she sticks to me like a curse. For 17 years now. The words hit Rosalie like lashes. She thought of her mother Elisa, who had died years ago, the only person who had ever called her sunshine, despite her ghostly pallor. Elisa had combed her hair and whispered softly, "You are beautiful, my darling. God made you special." But God seemed to have changed his mind after he took Mama. "The thing is," Gida continued, pacing back and forth in the room, "an Apache warrior asked for her hand. Chaska, do you know that name?" The men exchanged nervous glances. "The one with the visions?" asked Crawford. "The one who claims to talk to spirits? That's the one." Gida stopped and folded his arms. "He made me an offer. 20 horses, safe passage for my herds through their territory, and he gave Rosalie a cold look. He's taking her away from me." Rosalie felt her stomach tighten. She had heard the rumors, the conversations that fell silent when she entered a room, but she had hoped that was all it was, rumors, that even her father wouldn't sink so low. "Jed," Cross said slowly, "that's your daughter." "She's a nightmare with my name," Gida snorted. "Look at her, pale as a ghost, eyes red as hell itself. People in town cross the street when they see her. They think she brings bad luck, and damn it, maybe they're right." Rosalie bit her lower lip to keep from crying. She remembered the last time she had been in town, when Miss Henderson had pulled her children away from her and whispered, "Don't look into her eyes, children. That's not natural." "But to give an Indian woman as a wife?" Crawford shook his head. "That's against nature." "Against nature?" Gida laughed. "Look at her. She's against nature. At least with this deal, I can make something useful out of her." The door opened and all heads turned. A man entered, tall, with copper-colored skin and long black hair braided into a ponytail. He wore traditional Apache clothing, but his eyes were different, gentle, wise, and they rested on Rosalie with an expression she couldn't interpret. "Chaska," Gida said, his voice suddenly more respectful, punctual as always. The Apache warrior nodded slowly. "Gida Benton." His voice was deep and melodic. his English accent-free. "I come to see what you call white stag." Rosalie felt her cheeks flush. Even the Apaches had nicknames for her. White deer, as if she were a rare animal to be hunted or put on display. Chaska stepped closer. His movements were smooth and deliberate. When he stood in front of her, Rosalie looked into his dark eyes and saw something she hadn't seen since her mother died. Kindness. "You are Rosalie," he said gently. There was no question. She nodded. Her voice had left her. "I am Chaska. I have seen you in visions." He spoke softly as if it were a secret between them. "A white deer walking across sacred land, pure and innocent." Jita cleared his throat loudly. "Yes, yes, very poetic. Let's get down to business. 20 horses, you said, plus the trade agreement." Chaska looked at Jita. His expression grew colder. "I said I would come and see. I did not say I would take them." "What do you mean?" Jita's voice became sharp. "We have a deal." "You made a deal," Chaska said calmly. "I agreed to come and see. Now I see." He turned back to Rosalie. "How old are you, child?" 17, she whispered. 17, he repeated thoughtfully. "And your father treats you like cattle to be sold." Jita stepped forward. "Listen here, Indian." "No." Chaska's voice was soft, but it carried an authority that silenced Jita. "You listen. I see a child who knows pain, a child who has never known love except from her mother who is no longer here." Rosalie stared at him. How could he know that? "I also see a man," Chaska continued, looking directly at Jita, "who is betraying his own flesh and blood. That is not honorable. That is not the way of a warrior." "Honor," Jita snorted. "What do you know about honor? You're a savage, a papawa." Rosalie's voice was little more than a whisper, but it cut through the tension in the room. All eyes were on her. "If he takes me, will I be safe?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Jita opened his mouth, but Chaska answered first. "You will be safe," he said solemnly. "I swear it on the spirits of my ancestors. Not only will you be safe, you will be loved." Rosalie felt something break inside her chest. Loved. When was the last time she had heard that word? "Good," Jita said quickly. "Then it's decided. She's yours. 20 horses, and you take her with you." "I'll take her with me," Chaska confirmed, "but not as livestock and not for horses." "What do you mean?" Chaska looked at Rosalie, his eyes full of warmth. "I mean that I'll take her for what she is, a child who needs protection, a wounded spirit who needs healing." "I don't care what you do with her," Jita said, but his voice sounded uncertain. "Just get her out of here." Rosalie felt like she was drowning. Everything was happening so fast. Her whole life was changing in this one moment, and she had no control over it. "Child," Chaska said gently, holding out his hand, "will you come with me?" She looked at his hand, strong but not threatening. Then she looked at her father, who was looking at her with undisguised disgust. The men in the corner whispered and shook their heads. She swallowed hard. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "You always have a choice," Chaska said. "But sometimes the choice is between a life without love and a life with possibilities." Rosalie thought of her mother Elisa, of the warm hands that had stroked her hair, of the voice that had whispered to her that she was beautiful, of the eyes that had looked at her with pride and love. Then she thought of the last 6 years, of the cold, of the cruelty, of the loneliness. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in Chaska's hand and said, "I'll come with you." Chaska smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen in months. "Good. Then pack your things, only the essentials." As Rosalie went into her small room, she heard Jedediah talking to the other men. "Finally," he muttered, "finally, I'm rid of this curse." She opened the old wooden chest at the foot of her bed and took out her few possessions: a dress, a scarf, a small medallion with a picture of her mother, and a book of poems that Elisa had read to her. When she came out again, Chaska was waiting patiently for her. "Are you ready?" She nodded, even though her heart was pounding like a hummingbird in a cage. "Wait," Jed said suddenly. "I don't want people to say I just gave my child away. I want to make it official." "What do you mean?" Jessica asked. "A ceremony tonight in front of the townspeople. I want everyone to see that she's your problem now." Rosalie felt her stomach tighten. "Dad, please." "No." Jedediah was adamant. "I want everyone to know that you're no longer my responsibility. If you're found dead tomorrow, no one should come to me." The words cut deep, but Rosalie was surprised that they hurt less than she expected, perhaps because she finally saw the truth about her father. "If that's what you want," Cheska said calmly, "but the ceremony will be according to my rules, not yours." "I don't care what the rules are," Jeddah said, "as long as it's over." As they left the house, Rosalie looked back one last time. Through the window, she saw the room where she had grown up, the shadows she had known. But it didn't feel like saying goodbye to a home. It felt like escaping from a prison. "I know that look," Cheska said quietly beside her. "It's the look of a bird being let out of its cage, fear and hope at the same time." "How do you know that?" "Because I too once lived in a cage of anger and loss, until the spirits showed me that there was another way." They walked silently to his horse, a magnificent pinto with friendly eyes. Cheska helped her mount, his hands gentle and respectful. "Where are we going?" she asked. "First, to the ceremony your father wants. Then we'll go home." "Where is that?" Cheska swung himself onto the horse behind her. "We'll find out, but I promise you one thing, white deer, wherever it is, you will be welcome." As they rode through the town, people came out of their houses and shops. Rosalie felt their stares like arrows on her skin. They whispered and pointed at her, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disgust. "Look," she heard someone say, "the curse is finally being carried away." "Poor thing," murmured a woman. "But maybe it's for the best. Who knows what misfortune she would have brought upon us?" Rosalie pulled her shawl lower over her face, but Cheska placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Let them talk," he said softly. "Their words cannot hurt you. You are worth more than they will ever understand." They reached the town square where a crowd had already gathered. Jedediah stood in the middle, his voice loud and theatrical. "Friends and neighbors," he cried, "you all know of my special situation, my daughter." He spat out the word like poison. "Tonight, this situation will come to an end. I hereby hand her over to Shaka of the Apache tribe. She is no longer my responsibility." The crowd murmured and whispered. Rosalie felt her face flush with shame. Cheska dismounted from his horse and helped her do the same. Then he stepped forward, his posture dignified and proud. "I am Cheska, and I take this young woman not as a burden, but as a gift, not as a curse, but as a blessing." The crowd fell silent. "You see albinism and think of demons. I see purity and think of spirits. You see weakness and think of misfortune. I see strength and think of healing." He turned to Rosalie and spoke louder so that everyone could hear. "You are no longer the child of a man who does not value you. You are now under the protection of those who will honor you."
Rosalie felt tears running down her cheeks, but this time they were not tears of shame, they were tears of relief. "And if any of you ever call her a curse or a ghost or a demon again," said Cheska, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, "you'll have me to deal with." The silence was oppressive. Then Jedediah cleared his throat. "Well, that's that. She's your problem now, Indian." Cheska looked at him for a long time, then shook his head. "No, Jedediah Benton. She is my blessing now. And you will have to live the rest of your life knowing that you threw away the most precious gift you ever had." With these words, he helped Rosalie back onto the horse and swung himself behind her. "Let's wait for the sun to set," he said quietly. "Then we'll ride into your new life." As the sun disappeared behind the hills and the first star appeared in the sky, they rode out of the city. Rosalie did not look back. For the first time in her life, she looked only forward. We have spent a lot of time telling and preparing this story. If you like it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The wind still carried the dust of the city on their backs as they reached the first hills of Apache territory. Rosalie clung to the saddle, her knuckles white with tension. The darkness seemed to swallow her, and only the warm, steady breath of Chaskatoska's horse beneath her reminded her that she was still alive. "How much further?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rhythmic clatter of hooves. "Not far now," Cheska replied behind her. His voice was calm and reassuring. "Do you see the fires over there?" Rosalie followed his gaze and saw faint orange dots of light in the distance, flickering like trapped stars in the valley. Her stomach clenched with fear. That's their camp?" "Our camp," he corrected gently. "Your home. Your home." The words sounded strange to her ears. She had never really had a home, only a place where she was tolerated. But as they got closer, she could make out figures around the fires, hear the muffled murmur of voices and the soft whinnying of horses. "Cheska," she said hesitantly, "what will they think of me?" He was silent for a moment, and she felt his hand rest lightly on her shoulder. "Some will be afraid, some will be curious, but all will learn what I already know." "And what is that?" "That you were a gift, not a curse." The camp lay in a natural hollow between low hills, sheltered from the wind and prying eyes. Rosalie counted about a dozen teepees, their conical shapes silhouetted sharply against the starry sky. Dogs barked as they approached, and she saw faces turning from the tent openings. "Cheska is back," said a deep voice. A young man stepped into the light. He was tall and muscular, with a proud face and burning eyes. But what had he brought with him? Cheska dismounted from his horse and helped her do the same. Her legs trembled when her feet touched the ground. She pulled her shawl lower over her face, but the gathered people stared at her anyway. "Hoop on," Cheska said calmly to the young man. "I am bringing home a lost spirit." "You are bringing a white woman to our camp," Whipon said sharply. "A spirit woman with demon eyes." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She heard words in Apache that she did not understand, but the tone was clear. Disapproval, fear, anger. "She is not a demon," Cheska said firmly.
"She is a white deer, pure and innocent. I have seen her in visions." "Visions." Wapoon laughed bitterly. "Your visions again, old man. Those dreams will be the ruin of us all." "Enough." Cheska raised his hand, and his voice carried an authority that silenced even Wapoon. "I am your war chief. My decisions are respected." He turned to the crowd, his voice clear and firm. "This young woman is not what you think she is. She is not my wife, as her father imagined." Rosalie felt all eyes turn to her. Her heart was pounding so loudly that she was sure everyone could hear it. "She is my daughter," said Cheska. The silence that followed was so complete that Rosalie could hear the crackling of the fire. Then Wapun broke the silence. "What? I say she is my daughter. I am adopting her according to our law and custom. From this day forward, she is under my protection and bears my name." "This is madness." Wapun took a step forward. "You can't just adopt a white woman. She doesn't belong here." "She doesn't belong anywhere else," Cheska said calmly. "Her father rejected her. Her people cursed her. But I see in her the spirit of my lost daughter, Ister, who is begging me to give this child love." At the mention of Ister, the crowd fell silent. Rosalie didn't understand the name, but she felt the weight of grief that resonated in Cheska's voice. "Ister is dead," Wapun said more quietly, but still angry. "You can't replace her with this stranger." "I'm not replacing her," Cheska said. "I'm honoring her memory by giving shelter to another lost child." A woman stepped out of the crowd, younger than Cheska, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Uncle," she said to Cheska, "perhaps you should explain to us what happened." "Naheli," Cheska said gratefully. "Yes, I should." He turned back to the crowd. "This man, Jedi Benton, wanted to sell his daughter like this. He called her a curse, a demon. He wanted to get rid of her like one would get rid of a lame horse." Rosalie felt shame flush her face. Even here, in front of these strangers, her humiliation was on display. "But when I saw her," Tuzga continued, "I recognized the sign. It came to me in a vision of a white doe walking across sacred ground, pure, innocent, and cursed by all who do not recognize her true nature." He placed his hand on Rosalie's shoulder. "This child has suffered enough. She deserves love, not more cruelty." "And when the soldiers come?" asked Wapun. "If her father changes his mind and wants her back? You risk us all for one woman." "Her father does not want her back," said Cheska with certainty. "He has cast her out before the whole tribe. She is dead to him." Naheli stepped closer to Rosalie. "What is your name, child?" "Rosalie," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Rosalie," repeated Naheli, carefully forming the unfamiliar syllables. "A beautiful name. I am Naheli, Cheska's niece. Welcome to our camp." "Naheli," Wapun turned to her angrily. "You support this madness?" "I support compassion," Naheli said calmly. "Something you seem to have forgotten, Wapun." The tension in the camp was palpable. Rosalie could feel the division. Some nodded in agreement with Naheli's words, others muttered their disapproval. She wished she could just vanish into thin air, disappear like the ghost everyone thought she was. "Enough for today," Cheska said finally. "It's been a long day. We can talk more tomorrow." He turned to Naheli. "Can you take care of Rosalie? Give her a place to sleep?" "Of course," Naheli said warmly. "Come with me, child." As they walked through the camp, Rosalie heard Wapun's angry voice behind them. "This will be the ruin of us all, Cheska. Mark my words. This will be the ruin of us all." Naheli's teepee was smaller than the others, but warm and inviting. Soft light filtered through the skin of the tent, and the scent of dried sage filled the air. Naheli led her to a corner where blankets and furs had been spread out to make a comfortable place to sleep. "You can sleep here," she said gently. "Are you hungry? I have a pot left over from dinner." Rosalie shook her head. Her stomach was too knotted to even think about food. "Thank you, but I can't." Naheli sat down next to her, her movements slow and soothing. "Are you afraid?" It wasn't a question, so Rosalie answered with a small nod. "That's understandable. Everything is new. Everything is strange." Naheli handed her a soft blanket made of buffalo hide. "But Taska is a good man. If he says you're his daughter, then he means it." "Why?" Rosalie whispered. "Why would he do that? He doesn't even know me." Naheli was silent for a while, her gaze thoughtful. "Taska had a daughter," she said finally. "Is she there?" "She was about your age when the disease came, the white disease brought by the settlers." Rosalie felt a twinge in her chest.
She died. Yes, 3 years ago. He wasn't the same after that. He withdrew, hardly spoke to anyone. But for the past few weeks, he's been talking about visions, about a white stag that brings healing. And he thinks it's you. He believes that a Geist led you to him, that you were here to heal the wound in his heart. Rosalie pulled the blanket tighter around herself. But I'm just a girl that nobody wants. Oh, child, Naheli's voice was full of compassion. You were so much more than you know. And here with us, you will have the chance to find that out. Outside, they heard voices. Wapun was still arguing. Others were responding. The discussion about her presence was not over. Will they accept me? Rosalie asked. Naheli hesitated for a moment. Some will need time. Change is scary, especially in these times when we have already lost so much. But Taska is respected, and if he recognizes you as his daughter, then I am sure. You are safe, Naheli assured her, and more than that, you will be loved. Rosalie lay down on the soft blankets and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She could still hear voices through the thin walls of the teepee. Some angry, some soothing. Her whole life had changed in a single day, and she didn't know what the morning would bring. Naheli, she whispered into the darkness. Yes, thank you for being kind to me. You don't have to thank me, little sister. It's only natural. Little sister. Another new title, a new identity. Rosalie closed her eyes and thought of her mother Elisa, of her gentle hands and loving words. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she was not only tolerated, but welcome. The wind howled across the camp, but for the first time in years, it didn't sound threatening. It sounded like a lullaby singing her to sleep while her new life waited for her outside. The first thing Rosalie heard the next morning was the soft murmur of Naheli's voice speaking outside the teepee. She lay still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Apache language, which sounded like music to her ears. The warm light of the morning sun penetrated the tent skin and cast dancing shadows on the walls. "Rosalie?" Naheli's voice was gentle as she entered the teepee. "Are you awake?" "Yes," Rosalie whispered, sitting up. Her white hair was tousled, and she smoothed it down shyly. "I brought you something to eat." Naheli Kent knelt down beside her and handed her a bowl of warm porridge and dried berries. "And I thought you might like to learn how we live here." Rosalie gratefully accepted the bowl. The porridge tasted unlike anything she had ever known. Earthier, with a hint of wild herbs. "Thank you. What is it?" "Corn with wild onions and beans," Naheli said with a smile. "Ista always loved it." At the mention of Cheska's deceased daughter, Rosalie fell silent.
Tell me about her. Nayeli sat down next to her, her eyes softened with memories. She was like sunshine, always laughing, always curious. She collected stones and feathers and little treasures that she hid in the camp. She called it her little pack wheel. How did she die? Smallpox. She came with a group of traders who claimed to want peace. Within a week, 6 children were dead. Naele's voice grew bitter. After that, Chaska never trusted anyone again. Until now. Rosalie ate in silence. The weight of responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. How could she ever fill the place of such a beloved child? "Come," Naele said after a while. "I'll show you the camp in daylight and teach you how to milk goats." They left the teepee together, and Rosalie saw the Apache camp in full sunlight for the first time. It was smaller than she had imagined. About 10 teepees arranged in a circle with fire pits and work areas in between. Children ran around between the tents. Their shouts and laughter filled the air. Women sat in front of their teepees, working on basketry or mending clothes. But when Rosalie appeared, the conversations fell silent. The children stopped playing and stared at her. A woman muttered something in Apache and made a sign with her hands that Rosalie did not understand. But the meaning was clear. Protection from evil spirits. "Ignore them," Naele whispered. "They'll get used to you."
They walked to an area at the edge of the camp where a small herd of goats was grazing. The animals were smaller and more agile than the cows on her father's ranch, with mischievous eyes and cheeky faces. "This one is called Kumara," said Nayeli, patting a brown goat on the neck. "She's stubborn, but she gives the best milk." Nayeli showed Rosalie how to milk the goat, the correct hand position, the gentle but firm grip, the rhythmic pull. At first Rosalie was clumsy, her fingers too stiff, her movements too hasty. But Kumara was patient, and after a while she began to understand the rhythm. "Good," Nayeli said encouragingly. "You're learning fast." "We had cows at home," Rosalie said quietly, "but Dad never let me touch them. He didn't want me around the animals. He said I'd curse them." Nayeli was silent for a moment, then laid her hand on Rosalie's arm. "There are no curses here, only life." When they had finished milking, Nayeli led her through the camp. She showed her where the women wove baskets, where the meat was dried, where the children were taught their lessons. Everywhere Rosalie felt the stares, some curious, some suspicious, some openly hostile. "Why are they all staring at me?" she finally asked. "You're different," Nayeli said honestly. "And for my people, different is often dangerous. We've lost too much to trust easily." They sat down under a large tree at the edge of the camp, where Nayeli began weaving baskets from dried grasses. She gave Rosalie a few blades and showed her the basic movements. "Tell me about your mother," Nayeli said gently, as her hands deftly worked the grasses. Rosalie's fingers trembled as she tried to copy the movements. "Mom was the only one who didn't treat me like a monster. She told me stories and brushed my hair and told me I was beautiful." "And you believed her?" "Back then I did." Rosalie struggled with the stubborn blades of grass. "But after her death, Dad told me every day that I was a curse, and the people in town stared at me as if I were something disgusting." "People fear what they don't understand," Nayeli said wisely. "But fear doesn't make it right." They worked in silence for a while. The sun warmed their faces. Rosalie began to understand the rhythm of weaving, the way the blades intertwined to create something strong and beautiful. "Nayeli," she said finally, "do you really believe that Chaska's visions are true, that I belong here?" Nayeli paused in her work and looked directly at Rosalie. "I believe that my uncle is a wise man, and I believe that every living creature deserves a place where it is loved. But the others will learn. Wapun is angry, yes, but he was also Ista's playmate. Her death hurt him deeply. He hates me. He hates the memory of the pain. That is something else." In the afternoon, Chaska came to them. He crouched down next to Rosalie and looked at her unfinished basket. "You're learning quickly," he said with satisfaction in his voice. "Nayeli is a good teacher," Rosalie replied shyly. "She is." He sat down next to her in the grass. "How are you feeling today?" "I don't know. Everything is so different, but," she hesitated, "it's not as bad as I thought." Chaska smiled. "Good. I wanted to talk to you about something. The elders are going to meet tonight. They want to see you, talk to you." Rosalie felt her stomach tighten. "Will they decide whether I can stay?" "They will see what I already see," Chaska said calmly, "that you belong here." "But what if they don't see it that way?" Chaska put his hand on Rosalie's shoulder. "Then we'll find another way. But you won't be alone. I promise you that." Rosalie spent the rest of the afternoon helping Nayeli with various tasks. She learned how to paint corn, how to cut meat into thin strips for drying, how to sort medicinal herbs. Her hands were not as skilled as the other women's, but she was eager and attentive. As the sun began to sink, she noticed a change in the camp. The men began to gather around the central fire, their faces serious. The women and children retreated to their teepees. "It's time," Chaska said gently. Rosalie followed him to the fire. Her legs felt weak. The elders were already sitting in a circle. 5 men with weather-beaten faces and wise eyes. Wapun stood apart, his arms crossed, his face a mask of disapproval. "Sit down," Chaska said, pointing to a place next to him. One of the elders, a man with silver-gray hair and kind eyes, spoke first. "I am Hotet, the elder of this camp. You want to adopt a daughter. That is a big deal." Rosalie nodded. Her voice had left her. "Tell us about yourself," Hotet said gently. "Who are you? Where do you come from?" Rosalie told her story in a trembling voice. She told of her mother's death, her father's cruelty, her loneliness and pain. She spoke of her fear of the future and her hope for a place where she could belong. The elders listened silently, their faces impenetrable. When she had finished, there was a long silence. "You are very young," said another elder finally. "And you're white. Why should we trust you?" "I don't know," whispered Rosalie. "I can only promise that I want to learn, that I want to be respectful." Puntrat spoke. "She brings danger with her. Her father will come. The soldiers will come. We are risking everything for a stranger." "And if she's not a stranger?" Chaska's voice was calm but powerful, as if she were a gift from the spirits. "Your visions," Wapun snorted. "Always your visions." "She appeared to me again last night," Chaska said calmly. "She stood next to the white stag and smiled. She nodded to me as if to say, 'Yes, father, that's right.'" The elders exchanged glances. Visions were sacred, not to be dismissed lightly. "If that is true," Ahote began. "It is true," Chaska said firmly. "I swear by Ista's spirit." The deliberations lasted another hour. Rosalie sat silently while the men debated. Some spoke for her, others against her. Wapun remained unyielding, but she noticed that his support was waning. Finally, Ahote rose. "We have decided. You may stay, daughter of Chaska, but you are on probation. One false step, one sign of treachery or danger, and you must go." "I understand," Rosalie whispered. "And you," Ahote turned to Chaska. "You bear full responsibility for her. Her behavior reflects on you."
"I accept that," said Chaska without hesitation. As the gathering dispersed, Wapun approached Rosalie. "You may have deceived them," he said quietly, "but you won't deceive me. I will be watching you. And at the first sign of betrayal, Wapun." Chaska's voice was a warning. The young warrior turned away and disappeared into the darkness. "Don't worry about him," Thoska said to Rosalie. "He'll calm down." But as she lay in Nahali's teepee that night, Rosalie heard hoofbeats in the distance, fast, urgent, receding. Someone was leaving the camp in the darkness. She thought of Wapun's angry words and closed her eyes tightly. Somewhere in the distance, she knew, her father was already planning her return. And perhaps, just perhaps, he already had an ally in the camp itself. The hoofbeats in the night proved to be a harbinger of the storm. 3 days later, just as Rosalie had learned how to bake bread from acorns, a spear rode into the camp with news that made the blood freeze in her veins. "Armed men," he gasped, still out of breath from his hasty ride. 20, maybe 25. They're coming from the east, led by a tall man with a gray beard." Rosalie dropped the acorn paste she had been making. Jadadi, her father, had come. Chaska, who had been talking to other men nearby, immediately turned to her. "How far away are they?" "Half a day's ride," replied the spearman, "but they're moving fast and they're heavily armed." Panic spread through the camp like wildfire. Women began hurriedly gathering their children. Men reached for weapons. Rosalie stood there, frozen. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. "This is your fault," Wapun's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He marched straight toward Rosalie, his eyes burned with rage. "You led them here. You betrayed us all." "I didn't betray anyone," Rosalie stammered, but her voice was weak and uncertain. "Enough, Wapun." Thoska stepped between them. "She didn't do anything. She couldn't have."
Wapoon laughed bitterly. You think it's a coincidence that her father shows up right now, after 3 days? Someone told him where we are. The accusation hung heavy in the air. Rosalie saw faces turn toward her, eyes full of mistrust and fear. Even Nahali looked confused. I didn't do anything, Rosalie whispered. I swear, I didn't do anything. Maybe not consciously, Wapoon said coldly, but you're a decoy, a Trojan horse. Your father knew we would take you in, and now he can attack us when we're weak. That's enough, Thoska's voice thundered across the camp. We're wasting time with accusations while the enemy is closing in. Ahote, he turned to the elder, we must make a decision. Ahote stepped forward, his face serious and tense. What are our options? We can fight, said a young warrior. We know the land. We can lure them into an ambush. With 25 armed men? Wapoon shook his head. That would be suicide. We could flee, suggested a woman. Break camp and go to the mountains, leaving our elders behind. Another man shook his head. Impossible. There is another option, said Wapoon slowly, his gaze fixed on Rosalie. We give them back what they want. The silence that followed was oppressive. Rosalie felt her stomach tighten as if she were falling. No, said Thoska firmly. That's out of the question. Why not? Wapoon stepped closer. She's a white woman, not an Apache. Why should we die for her? Because she's my daughter, Thoska said, his voice like steel. And no one takes my daughter away from me. Your daughter is dead. Wapoon's cry rang out across the camp. She's dead, and this stranger will never replace her. Thoska woved so fast that Rosalie could barely see him. One moment he was speaking, the next he had grabbed Wapoon by the collar and pinned him against a tree. Don't you ever dare again, he hissed, mentioning her name in the same breath. Ys and Rosalie are both my daughters, one in the spirit world, the other in this world. Thoska, let him go, Ahote said calmly. Violence among us will solve nothing. Thoska let go of Wapoon, but his eyes still burned with rage. Wapoon rubbed his neck and stepped back. What do you want to do then? Wapoon asked hoarsely. Let us all die for a stranger? I want to. Thoska paused. His gaze wandered over the assembled faces of his people. Rosalie saw the torment in his eyes, the weight of the impossible decision. I want to do the right thing. Thoska, Rosalie said softly. All eyes turned toward her. Maybe I should go. No, but if my presence puts everyone in danger. No, Thoska repeated more firmly. You belong here. I saw it in visions. Ahote confirmed it to me. Your visions are wrong, Wapoon said. Even spirits can be mistaken. My visions are not wrong, Thoska said calmly, but I now understand what they mean. The white stag brings not only healing, but also a test, a chance for us to show who we really are. He turned to the crowd. Are we a people who sacrifice their children to please the enemy? Or are we a people who fight for what is right, even when it is difficult? Fine words, said Wapoon bitterly, but they won't protect us from bullets. No, agreed Chaska. Our courage will do that. Ahote stepped forward and raised his hand to call for silence. Enough. We have a decision to make and we don't have much time. He looked directly at every man and woman in the camp. All those in favor of returning the girl, raise your hands. Slowly, hesitantly, a few hands went up. Rosalie counted them with a sinking heart. 7, more than she had hoped for. All those in favor of protecting her. More hands went up this time. Rosalie dared to hope. 10, 15, and all those abstaining, 3 more hands. The decision was close, but clear. The camp has spoken, he said solemnly. The girl will remain under our protection. Wapoon stared around in disbelief. You've all gone mad. You'll kill us all for a stranger. No, said a new voice. Nahali stepped forward, her face determined. We will save ourselves by doing the right thing. She went to Rosalie and placed her hand on her shoulder. You are my sister, and no one is taking my sister away from me." One by one, the women stepped forward and stood beside Nahali. Then the men followed. Even some of those who had voted against her joined the circle around Rosalie. Wapoon looked around, isolated and alone. "You're all crazy," he muttered, then louder. "But if you want to fight, I'll fight at your side, not for her," he glared at Rosalie, "but for you." "That's all I ask," said Chaska. "Now we must prepare." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. The men prepared their weapons, checked bows and arrows, sharpened knives. The women hid the children in safe caves in the nearby hills and packed important supplies. Rosalie felt helpless amid the preparations. "What can I do?" she asked Nahali. "You stay with me," Nahali said firmly. "If there is fighting, we'll both hide." "No," Rosalie said with surprising determination. "I don't want others to fight for me while I hide." "You're not a warrior, little sister." "But I'm the reason for this fight. I should be there." Chaska, who was standing nearby inspecting his weapons, heard her. "She's right," he said. "If we fight for her, she should be able to see what we're sacrificing for her." "Vaska," Nahali protested, "it's too dangerous." "Everything is dangerous," he replied calmly. "But courage is not shown in avoiding danger, but in facing it with dignity." As the sun reached its zenith, the riders came into view. Rosalie stood on a low hill next to Thaska and watched the cloud of dust approach. Her heart was pounding so loudly that she was sure everyone could hear it.
"There he is," she whispered when she recognized Jetter's massive figure at the head of the group. "Yes," said Thaska calmly, "but he's not coming as a father, but as an enemy. Don't forget that." The riders stopped at the edge of the camp. Their horses snorted and pranced. Jade rode forward. His eyes scanned the camp until they fell on Rosalie. "There you are, you little ghost," he shouted in a loud voice. "It's time to come home." "This is her home," Shaska replied calmly. Jade laughed harshly. "An Apache for a Christian way? You're joking, Indian." "I'm not joking. She's my adopted daughter, and she's staying here." "Adopted daughter?" Jade spat into the dust. "You bought her to marry her. Don't pretend it's anything else." "I didn't buy her," Shaska said firmly. "I saved her from you." The tension was palpable. The armed men behind Jediah reached nervously for their weapons. The Apache warriors drew their bows. "Last chance, Indian," said Jediah coldly. "Give me back my daughter, or we'll take her." Thaska stepped forward. "Then you'll have to get past me." "That can be arranged," said Jediah with a cruel smile. But then something unexpected happened. Rosalie stepped forward, her voice clear and strong in the tense silence. "I'm not your daughter," she said to Jediah. "You disowned me 3 days ago in front of the whole tribe. You said I was no longer your responsibility." "That was the only truth you ever told me," she interrupted him. "The first truth you ever told me." Jediah stared at her, clearly surprised by her boldness. "You're coming with me whether you want to or not." "No," Rosalie said firmly, "I'm not." The wind blew across the camp, carrying with it the smell of dust and sweat and fear. 2 worlds stood facing each other, ready to fight, and Rosalie felt the weight of the moment on her shoulders. This was her choice, her chance to finally decide who she was and where she belonged. And for the first time in her life, she chose herself. The silence after Rosalie's words was so complete that she could hear the creaking of the saddles and the nervous snorting of the horses. Jade stared at her as if she had turned into something completely foreign before his eyes. And maybe she had. "You don't know what you're saying," he finally said, his voice rough with disbelief. "Those savages have turned your head." "No," Rosalie replied calmly. "For the first time in my life, I see clearly." Behind Jade, his men murmured restlessly. Rosalie recognized some of them. Bill Crawford, the neighbor, Tom Wheeler from the general store, other ranchers and businessmen from town.
Men who had known her all her life, who had watched her father humiliate her and never said a word. "Listen, girl," Crawford said in a feigned fatherly voice, "you're confused. You belong with your own people. Just come with us and everything will be all right." "My own people?" Rosalie laughed bitterly. "You mean the people who called me a ghost and a demon, who crossed the street to avoid me? Those are my people?" "You're a white woman," Weisler said stubbornly. "That can't change." "No," Rosalie agreed, "but what can change is who considers me family." Jedi dismounted his horse, his movements slow and threatening. "Enough of this nonsense. You're coming with me, and so is Baster." He took a step toward her, but Thaska moved between them, his body a barrier between father and daughter. "You will not touch her," Shaska said quietly, but his voice carried a threat that everyone could hear. "She is mine," Jetter barked the words, his self-control finally lost. "I gave birth to her. I raised her." "You tortured her," Shaska said coldly. "You treated her like cattle and tried to sell her. You forfeited the right to call her your daughter." Jedi reached for the pistol at his belt, but he wasn't fast enough. An Apache arrow whistled through the air and dug into the ground at his feet. A warning. "The next one will hit your heart," Wappen said coldly, his bow already drawn with a new arrow. Rosalie was surprised to see him defend her, despite all his previous hostility. The situation escalated quickly. Jedah's men drew their weapons. The Apache warriors drew their bows. Death hung in the air like the smell before a thunderstorm. "Wait!" A new voice cut through the tension. An old man rode out from the group of settlers, Reverend Hay from the town church. "Please, everyone, wait." He laboriously dismounted his horse and cautiously approached the front line. "Must this really end in bloodshed?" "It's the Indians' fault," Jedi growled. "All he has to do is give me back what is mine." "Property?" Reverend Hay looked at Jedi with an unreadable expression. "Are you referring to your daughter as property?" "I'm talking about my rights as a father. Rights come with responsibilities, Jedi. What responsibilities have you fulfilled towards this child?" Jedi opened his mouth, but no words came out. "She's not normal," Jedi stammered. "You've seen her. Those eyes, that skin. She's cursed." "She's a child of God," Reverend Hay said sternly, "just like every other child. And if you can't see that, then you are the one who's cursed." The words hung heavy in the air. Some of Jedah's men began to grow restless, their convictions shaken. "Reverend," said Crawford hesitantly, "she's with the heathens. That can't be right." "And yet," said a gentle voice behind them, "these heathens treat her with more love and respect than her own people ever did." Naheli turned around, her posture dignified and calm. "I am Naheli, niece of the warrior Shaska. I have seen this girl blossom in the last few days. I have seen the fear disappear from her eyes and be replaced by hope." She addressed Jediah directly. "Can you say the same? Can you say that she has blossomed under your care?" Jediah stared at her, his face red with anger and frustration. "You don't understand. She brings misfortune. Everywhere she goes, the only misfortune here," he interrupted her. "Shaska, is that you?" Suddenly, a loud cry rang out from the edge of the camp. All heads turned, and Rosalie gasped in shock. There, at the edge of her vision, a translucent figure flickered, a little girl with long black hair and friendly eyes. "It's there!" Rosalie wasn't the only one who saw her. Several of the Apache pointed excitedly at the apparition, their voices reverent and astonished. Even some of the settlers stared in that direction, although it was unclear if they saw the figure or just noticed the reaction of the others. Shaska fell to his knees, his eyes filled with tears. "She's there," he whispered. The figure nodded to him, then turned to Rosalie. Her eyes were full of warmth and acceptance. She raised a translucent hand and pointed to Rosalie, then to Shaska, then to herself. The message was clear. "Family, do you see?" Shaska said, his voice choked with tears. "Do you see the sign? She is blessing this union. She recognizes Rosalie as her sister. Even Wappen stared reverently at the apparition. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his bow. "That's impossible," stammered Jade. "Many things are impossible for eyes that do not want to see," Shaska said as he rose. Ystir's figure began to fade, but her smile remained visible for a moment longer. Reverend Hay cleared his throat. "I believe," he said slowly, "that we have witnessed something holy here, something that transcends our petty human prejudices." "But she's white," Weisler protested weakly. "Christ wasn't white either," replied the Reverend sheepishly. "Should we reject him because of that?"
Rosalie could see it in the men's faces. Doubt, shame, the slow realization that they might be on the wrong side. "It's all magic." Jedediah desperately clung to his dwindling authority. "Indian tricks. You're being fooled by ghosts." "The only deception here," Rosalie said calmly, her voice stronger than ever, "is the lie you've been telling yourself. The lie that I'm a curse. The lie that I'm worth less than other people." She took a step forward, her red eyes fixed on her father. "I'm not cursed, Dad. I am blessed. Blessed with people who love me for who I am." "You are my daughter!" Jedediah screamed the words, but they sounded desperate, hollow. "No," Rosalie said with quiet certainty, "I was your daughter, but you threw me away. You rejected me in front of everyone. Do you remember?" Jedediah opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. "And now," Rosalie continued, "I am Chaska's daughter and Naheli's sister and part of a family that wants me." Crawford cleared his throat awkwardly. "Jat," he said quietly, "perhaps we should—" "No!" He gestured to his men. "You came here to help me, you swore." "We came to help you save your daughter," Crawford said calmly. "But look at her, Jedediah. Really look at her. Does she look like she needs saving?" All eyes turned to Rosalie. She stood upright, her shoulders back, her head held high. The frightened, cowering figure of a few days ago was gone. In her place stood a young woman with dignity and strength. "She's different," Wheeler murmured. "Yes," Reverend Hay agreed. "She's happy." The realization hit Jedediah's group like a blow. One by one, the men began to lower their weapons. Some cast ashamed glances at their leader. "Jeddah," Crawford finally said, "I think we should go." "Go?" Jedediah stared at him in disbelief. "Without her?" "She made her choice," Crawford said simply. "And maybe, just maybe, it's the right choice." Jedediah looked around, saw the faces of his men, the determination of the Apache, the quiet strength of his daughter. The realization of his defeat washed over him like a wave. "This isn't over," he said finally, but his voice had lost all its strength. "No," Chaska agreed. "It's over. You've lost your daughter, not because of us, but because of your own actions. Live with that knowledge." One by one, Jedediah's men climbed back onto their horses. Reverend Hay approached Rosalie one last time. "God bless you, child," he said gently. "You have shown courage greater than that of men twice your age." "Thank you, Reverend," Rosalie replied. "Take care of the other children in town. Don't let what happened to me happen to them." He nodded solemnly. "I promise." As the riders rode away, Jedediah stood there alone, defeated. He looked at Rosalie one last time, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Regret. But it was too late for regret. "Goodbye, Papa," she whispered so softly that only the wind could hear her. Then she turned and walked toward her new family, toward the people who had loved her when she couldn't love herself. The battle was over, and for the first time in her life, she had won. She had won herself. The cloud of dust from Jedediah's departure had long since disappeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent, bathing the Apache camp in golden light. Rosalie sat on a fallen tree trunk at the edge of the camp and looked at her hands, those pale, delicate hands that had been a sign of her otherness for so long.
Today, they seemed to her to be a symbol of something else, of a new beginning. "You look pensive, little sister," Naheli said, sitting down beside her. She was carrying a small leather bag, which she placed carefully in Rosalie's hands. "What's this?" asked Rosalie, opening the soft straps. "A gift from all of us," Naheli smiled warmly. "Open it." Rosalie opened the bag and gasped softly. Inside was a beautifully crafted silver and turquoise medallion shaped like a leaping deer. Tiny pearls framed the design, and on one side was engraved a small image of a doe. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her finger over the delicate work. "Chaska made it," Naheli said. "He worked on it all might. It's the sign of your new name." "My new name?" Chaska approached them, his footsteps soft on the soft ground. "Shibache," he said gently. "That is your Apache name. It means white deer who brings healing." Rosalie felt her eyes fill with tears. "I bring healing?" "You've already started," Chaska said, sitting down on the other side of her. "You helped me heal my pain. You showed our people that love is stronger than fear. And today, you even reached Wapun's heart." As if he had heard his name, Wapun approached cautiously. He stopped a few steps away. His face showed a mixture of shame and determination. "Shibache," he said, carefully pronouncing the new name. "I owe you an apology." Rosalie looked at him in surprise. "You owe me nothing." "Yes, I do." Wapun knelt down in front of her. It was a gesture of respect she had never expected. "I was blind with anger and pain. I saw a threat in you when I should have seen a sister." He reached into his shirt and took something out, a small carved wooden animal, a doe with large, gentle eyes. "My sister made this," he said quietly, "shortly before she died. She said it was for the white sister who would come one day." I thought she was fantasizing because of the fever, but he held the carving out to Rosalie. "I think she knew something we didn't." Rosalie took the little doe with trembling hands. The wood was warm and smooth, polished and loved by little hands. "She knew you would come," Wapun continued, "and she knew we would need you." "Us?" Rosalie asked quietly. "Our people are so tired of fighting, of hiding, of losing. We had forgotten what it was like to win something new. But you reminded us that family isn't just about blood." He stood up and addressed the entire camp, which had slowly gathered around them. "From this day forward, Shibache is my sister. Whoever harms her, harms me." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. One by one, the women stepped forward and touched Rosalie's hand or shoulder, a sign of acceptance and welcome. Barajote, the elder, said, "We must also discuss practical matters. Jedediah's departure doesn't mean the danger is over. Others could come, soldiers, officials, severe ones. You're right, we can't stay here forever." "Then let's go," said Rosalie determinedly, "all together. We'll find a new place." "You do that?" asked Naheli. "Leave everything behind?" Rosalie looked around the camp that had been her first real home, at the people who had loved her when she couldn't love herself. "This," she said, touching her heart, "I'll take with me. Everything else is just a place." "Wise words," Chaska said with pride in his voice. "Then we'll go north to the mountains. There are hidden valleys where we can live in peace." "When?" asked Wapun. "Tomorrow at sunrise," decided Chaska. "Tonight we celebrate. We celebrate a new daughter, a new sister, and a new beginning." The night was filled with singing and soft music. The women prepared a feast, the men told stories, and the children danced around the fire. Rosalie found herself in the middle of it all, no longer an outsider, but a loved member of the family. As the celebrations drew to a close, Rosalie withdrew with Naheli and Chaska to a spot a little way away. They sat on a small hill and looked up at the stars. "Naheli," Rosalie said quietly, "will you come with us?" "Of course," Naheli replied without hesitation. "You don't think I'd leave my new sister alone?"
"And you, Chaska?"
Do you regret your decision to adopt me? Chaska was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the twinkling stars. Do you know what Est told me in my last dream? Rosalie shook her head. She said, Dad, I had to leave so that you could learn how to love again. And she had to suffer so that she could learn how strong she really is. Now you can both heal. He turned to Rosalie, his eyes moist with emotion. I don't regret anything. You saved my life, just as I saved yours. But what about your people? You're risking everything for me. My people, Thaska said firmly, are now you and Nahele and Wapen and all the others who will come with us. Family isn't what you're born with, it's what you build. As morning dawned, the camp was already bustling with activity. Teepees were being taken down, belongings packed, horses saddled. Rosalie helped where she could, her movements now skillful and confident. She stood at the edge of the camp and looked one last time at the place that had changed her life. Here she had learned what it meant to be loved. Here she had discovered who she really was. Ready? Asked Thaska, leading his horse to her. Yes, she said without hesitation. As they mounted and joined the caravan, Rosalie thought of her mother, Elisa. Somewhere in her heart, she felt that Mama was smiling. At last, her little daughter had found a home. The sun rose higher as they turned north, the caravan of about 20 souls who had decided to stay together. They rode through valleys and over hills, following old paths known only to the Apache. Where are we going? Rosalie asked as she rode up beside Chaskarit. To the mountains of the ancestors, he replied. There is a place there we call Shimabichi. Motherhug, hidden away with clear streams and green meadows, a place where we can make our own rules. And there we will be safe. There we will be free, Thaska corrected. And sometimes that's even more important than safety. Hours passed as they rode. Rosalie found herself engaged in conversations with various members of her new family. Stories about their hopes for the future, dreams of the life they would build. When the sun reached its zenith, they stopped in a shady valley to rest. Rosalie dismounted her horse and went to a small stream to drink. As she leaned over the clear water, she saw her reflection, and for a moment she hardly recognized herself. The frightened, cowering girl was gone. In her place she saw a young woman with an upright back and clear eyes. Her white hair shone in the sunlight like spun silver, and her red eyes radiated warmth and confidence. She was still different. She would always be different. But now, different was no longer synonymous with cursed. Now it meant special. Shiba Nashili's voice called her back to the present. Come and eat. Rosalie smiled and returned to her family. She sat down in the circle, accepted the food offered to her, and listened to the laughter and stories. As they continued their journey, Rosalie rode between Chaska and Nahele, the feeling of belonging warm in her chest. The past lay behind her like a shed snakeskin, still visible, but no longer part of her. Ahead of her lay an unknown future full of possibilities and promise. She didn't know what to expect in the mountains, but she knew she wouldn't be alone. She was Shiba-Shi, the white deer who brings healing. She was Chaska's daughter and Neli's sister. She was part of a family she had not been given by birth, but by love. The wind carried the scent of pine trees and wildflowers to them, and Rosalie breathed deeply. For the first time in her life, the air smelled like freedom. Behind them lay a world she had never understood. Ahead of them lay a world she would help shape. And somewhere in between, in that perfect moment of transition, Rosalie Benton had died and Shiba-Shi had been born. The white deer had finally come home.